Okay, welcome everybody to an episode of the Brain Food Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Simon. Joining with me today, Davin. How's it going?
It's going great.
It's going great. Good.
Yeah.
I'm off on holiday tomorrow, by the way.
I know.
Yeah.
With you gone, there's not really a lot for me to do. Well, there's a couple things more I got to do because I didn't quite get everything done, but I'll get those done.
Well,
shortly.
you could enjoy a less intense pace of work as well, then.
Yeah, that's the main thing. I'm still not going to take a day off, but I'll just have more normal.
Of course not. And like I say, I go on holiday. I'm gonna, there'll be some hours. I'll squeeze some stuff in. Anyway, this is why we're doing this on Thursday rather than our typical Friday. I think that was why I wanted to bring that up. And yes, so although that doesn't really matter because this is a podcast, that's just for the people who are watching live, I suppose. If you are listening to this on podcasts, you can also watch it live on YouTube, but don't do that. Rather, if you're watching it live on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast because we'd like to grow that.
Yeah, and in future, go listen there. We have a lot of episodes there, so, you can get caught up.
I don't even know how many we have now, but it's a lot.
It is a lot. I think it's like at least like 40.
That's cool. And they're all pretty long. And I don't know. Yeah. I think they're pretty good. We get good reviews.
We do.
Speaking of good reviews, is that what you wanted to prompt me into?
Yeah, go.
Speaking of good reviews, if you want to leave us a good or bad review, you can do so. And when we get to 1,000 reviews, we're going to give away a $1,000 Amazon gift card. How about that? That's a serious contest. Like, I was never a big contest enterer, but I'd enter a contest for $1,000.
Well, and you have reasonable, I mean, not like awesome odds, but it's not like winning the lotto. Like there's like decent odds that you'll win.
The odds of winning the lottery are depressingly low.
Yeah.
And then you go bankrupt anyway, apparently, according to a video we made.
Yeah, if you do win. That's or just everyone hates you after.
Yeah, it's not great. So
some people try to kill you. That's a thing that happens.
Oh God. So don't win the lottery as much as you might want it. Don't. Where do you want to start today? What's up? What are we doing? A quick fact and then moving into our main content?
We're going to, and for the main content is going to be on Lord Minimus. Who, it's an interesting dwarf person that lived a long time ago. And
what a coincidence! An interesting story. His name was Minimus, and he's a dwarf. What are the odds?
But before that, we're going to talk a quick fact. So, have you ever wondered why Dick is short for Richard?
Oh my God, I have wondered that. Tell me.
Yes. So, to begin with here, the Richard itself, the name comes from the Proto-Germanic Rickharthu, which Rick meaning ruler and Harthu meaning hard, so hard ruler, basically. And so you might think from that it might come, like maybe the whole Dick thing came from, Dick as in penis, hard ruler, or Dick as in jerk, like a jerk. He's a hard ruler.
That's what I would think. I would think the jerk one, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it turns out neither of those things, because the penis one actually didn't come about until the 1890s, and it was actually a British Army slang, which the Army, like the Air Force, they have the best slang for everything. All the time, as we covered a bit ago. But in any event, it comes from neither of those things. So how did it actually come about? So it turns out it was around the 13th century that it happened, and so of course you have Richard. And then sometimes people would shorten it to Rich or Rick. That's just a thing that happened. And then they would do rhyming names, like so if you had a given name, it would be like Rich, Richard, and then Rick, and then of course the rhyming is Dick or Hick. And people don't know the Hick one now because nobody calls a Richard a Hick unless they're like a country bumpkin or something. But it's not like a common thing. But Dick has stuck around for whatever reason. And so it's thought that maybe the Dick one stuck around because it's at some point around the 16th century, at least Shakespeare references it, there's the Dick had become known as like the everyman like name, like Dick, like just guy, hey guy, who's like, hey Dick. So like every Tom, Dick, and Francis, which is what Shakespeare has in Henry IV. So that how of established the everyman thing, and so maybe that was a connection there. But also that has been speculated to be why that sort of everyman Dick is just everyman. How that maybe the British Army slang for Dick as in penis came about. So yeah, that is our quick fact today.
There you go. I always wondered. I always thought this might have just been a British thing. But so you'd call you call people Richard, who like my uncle's called Richard, but we call him Uncle Dick because
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's quite as common, but I did have a friend in high school named Richard, and we did call him Dick, and like not always to make fun of him. Sometimes to make fun of him, but
It's like
not always.
90% to make fun of him.
Yeah, but sometimes just like, hey, Dick, like, But other times, yeah, there was a lot of teasing as well.
Yeah,
that was the thing.
Hey, cock.
Yeah, yeah, but it was all in good fun. He was good scuba diving partner and whatnot. So fun times.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, now I know. Shall we have a quick word from our fantastic sponsors before diving in?
Is this your favorite sponsor? Because it's my favorite.
I don't pick favorites.
I should say,
I love them all equally.
of the product that a product that we actually are advertising. This is the one that I love the most for myself.
It is the one that I've used the most for the longest time before even doing YouTube, and then it also just became much more useful as I started doing YouTube.
So useful. Yes.
You know how much data I've backed up with Backblaze?
Yeah.
Am I supposed to say this because I feel like I might be abusing that generosity a little bit, because I got like 13 terabytes.
Oh, see, I have like 14 or so. I have about 14. So
$6 a month.
Yeah. It's and unlimited. You can do as much as you want. So they don't restrict.
Have you ever got a letter from your ISP telling you that you're downloading too much?
No, but that is a problem with one thing I have. So I have this whole server backed up, right? But then I moved locations to a new internet provider, and then I wanted to switch the stuff to the different computer. And so what would happen? I actually figured out there is a way to do it with Backblaze to switch it without it actually having to re-back up the whole thing. Because of course, if I backed up 14 terabytes, I definitely would get a letter. That time,
I relettered my drives, the hard drives on the computer, and then it desynced, and I couldn't work out how to get it, so I synced like a 4 terabyte hard disk again.
Oh no, you can do it. Like you can go. I don't remember how to do it. It's not actually. They have instructions on how. It's not that complicated at all. But just to switch, like if you want to switch a hard drive to another computer or whatnot. Not that. I mean, that's really more of an ISP problem, but they do have a mechanism for it anyway. So.
This is one of the many mechanisms they have. I should probably talk about some of the points they actually want us to talk about.
We probably should.
But it is really good. It's $6 a month. It is unlimited. You don't, why I brought up that ISP letter was I once got one when I lived with like 6 friends at university, and we all, I'm sure, downloaded a lot of stuff, legally, 100% legally from Steam and whatnot, all of us. And they sent us a letter to say, you guys downloaded like 120 gigabytes last month. This was 10 years ago. You've got to slow down. But Backblaze, none of that nonsense. If I wanted to, I could back up that 13 terabytes again right now.
Yeah, and you can also throttle it. Like if you do have the problem with the ISP, like if you have, I mean, not really many people have that massive amount to back up, but if you did, you can always tell it Backblaze to slow it down so you don't have that issue. But also, we should mention that it's automatic, so you just install it and then you forget about it. Everything happens automatically all the time. All your stuff is backed up.
I look at it maybe once every 2 months to make sure that the data has been backed up, and it always has.
Yeah.
So that's Backblaze. Backblaze.com/brainfood. 15-day free trial.
Yeah, go use that because we would like them to come back.
Yeah, it's great. Backblaze.com/brainfood. Check it out. Main content time. What's going on today? Other than this Minimus, right?
Yeah, Geoffrey Hudson was his proper name, he became known, I should say, as Lord Minimus, or his proper titles were Sir Geoffrey or Captain Hudson. Yeah, were titles that he would eventually get. So he was born sometime.
If I had both sides, I'd be like, yeah, you can just call me Sir Captain.
Or like
I demand that they be double-barreled.
Yeah, he preferred Captain was the one he went with, the one he preferred.
See, while it's lower in the order of precedence or whatever you call it, it is cooler, right? Captain.
Well, yeah, because Captain is like you kind of got to earn that to some extent. I mean, whereas the Sir, you can just be given that, just for like a court thing, like here's a favor and now you're going to do something for me. Like that was a thing that happened all the time.
True. But if I was 18 years old, not now because I probably can't go join the Navy. I'm like 32. I'm probably, too old for that shit. I could get, it's realistic. I could become a captain, I think, of like a ship or something. Or definitely if I join the army, because that's a lower rank. But becoming a knight, dude, it's rare. Like not many people get that. We made a video about this.
We did. You get nothing for it.
It's pretty cool though.
Yeah, it is cool. But so Geoffrey, Geoffrey Hudson. He was born in June of 1619. It's not exactly known what. Some people say June 14th, I think, but it's not really known. In Oakham, in the county of Rutland, England. And so he was the son of just a commoner, just a big old broad-shouldered guy by the name of John Hudson. And so it wasn't actually clear at first. So he had siblings, and they were all normal height. His mother was normal height and everything. But Geoffrey, it wasn't actually clear he was a dwarf at first because everything was perfectly proportionate. So he was a proportionate dwarfism.
Well, it'd be weird if he was born a dwarf, like a dwarf. Are there such things as dwarf babies?
Well, no, but you can tell usually more quickly that the limbs and stuff aren't quite proportionate to what you would expect as they're growing. And he as he was growing, as he's like 4 or 5, like he's still just this tiny little guy. He really wasn't growing that much, as we'll see. So this became, so what is his dad? They weren't like poor, but they didn't really have a lot of money. They were kind of, his dad worked as so he was like a guy who trained bulls to fight, but like not bullfighting like we would think of it, but like just like to fight other animals like dogs and stuff. And he did so for the Duke of Buckingham. So he didn't really have a lot of money, but he was well connected. And so, we should probably mention what is actually thought to be wrong with Geoffrey Hudson. So
wait, he's a dwarf. What more do you need?
Well, no, but at the time, what did they think actually caused it? I just wanted to bring this
in the blood.
Because it was funny. It's close. Close. No. While his mother was in labor, she supposedly choked on a pickle somehow.
Why are you eating pickles while giving birth?
I don't know. There's probably like something that they thought, like you eat a pickle when you're in birth to like ease something, pain, maybe. I don't know. But for whatever reason, she choked on a pickle while she was in labor, and that was thought to perhaps have caused his dwarfism. But of course, actually, it was probably hypopituitarism. But
you and your doctor speak.
Yeah, the pickle story is a lot better.
I'm sticking with the pickle. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, his dad worked for the Duke of Buckingham, George Vere, and so what his dad did know was, one, when his son grows up, he's not really got a lot of options, right? Like he's just a little guy. Like he was at 7 years old, he was still only 18 inches tall, which what is that in centimeters? Like 30, maybe 40 centimeters,
yeah,
maybe
45-ish.
Yeah, something like that. So he was super small, but also quite proportionate, which was a little bit rare to be that small and almost perfectly proportionate at 7. So his dad's thinking
proportionate means like he's just looks like a tiny person rather than has like weird, like a giant arms or something, like arms.
Like he's pretty proportionate. Like as we'll see when he's an adult, his head's a little bigger, but the rest of him was proportionate as you'd expect. So his sons doesn't have a lot of prospect, but what is a thing back then in royal courts is that almost everyone kept a dwarf or multiple dwarfs just for entertainment purposes, to like entertain guests at parties. Yeah. And so this is what his dad at 7 years old takes him, he's got connections. He takes him to the Duchess Catherine Vere and he says, "Hey, here's my son, check him out." And because he knows like this is rare and this is a thing sought after in courts. And naturally the Duchess was completely loved the little guy and kind of wanted to keep him. So she did. And so, and again, at the time though, they were keeping him more like pets almost, like, and they treated him kind of like pets. It wasn't awesome, but he's going to, either way, when he grows up, he's going to be demeaned and all that. So at least this way, he's also, has his own servants living like a life of luxury and stuff. So presumably this was what his dad was thinking. And he wasn't just like a horrible person, probably.
How long ago was this?
This was in the 17th century.
Okay.
Yeah.
So things were different back then.
Yeah, a bit. So yeah, he takes her there, he takes him there, and then the Duchess is like, "Yep, I want him," and so she proceeds to take him into her household. He's now a member of her court to entertain guests and whatnot. And so she mostly just like dresses him in miniature outfits and like treating him like a toy basically and a pet. So kind of debuting him at parties, showing him off to her friends and all that as they did. And so, but his life, he would get a little bit of an upgrade soon enough, Geoffrey would, because the Duke and Duchess were entertaining King Charles I and Queen Henrietta. And so they come over for a party. And as we've talked about before, there's an episode of podcast we did called "How Did the Practice of Women Jumping Out of Cakes Start," which is really good. If anyone hasn't listened to it, go.
I like that one. Yeah.
That one was super interesting. So at the time, just a real short, at the time, they used to bake like really large pies and various food items. Sometimes they make like boats. Like the food would be like part of the entertainment, not just to eat, but visually. And what it would do, sometimes they would have like birds burst out of a pie, and or frogs, or in one case, the most extreme case, I think, was the 28 members of an orchestra was inside a giant pie.
I'm sensing a YouTube video we could make, dude.
Yeah.
We bake a 28-piece orchestra pie.
Yeah, and so this was a thing. So she thought, all right, I'm gonna impress the king and queen with my new toy. So she'd only had him for a few months, and so her chef makes a rather small pie, and then Geoffrey's like all hunched down, scrunched into it, and so at the appropriate time, this pie is presented to the queen, and so when it's wheeled in front of her, then Geoffrey bursts out, and he's wearing like a little suit of armor that had been specially made for him, and also has a little sword that he's brandishing, and he kind of swings it about, and just amusing everyone with it, and the queen loved it. She thought this was awesome, and she was like, "I want one." That's basically the response. And so she asked the Duchess if she could go ahead and have Geoffrey. Like, could she take him? Because at the time she already had a couple dwarves, but none so small and like proportionate as this. And she also had a giant named William Evans, who was over 7 feet tall apparently. And she also had a monkey named Pug, and this was sort of her little collection.
This is so bizarre. Like the stuff people were into back in the day. Yeah.
So wrong.
Also, the queen, she goes to someone's house. They bring her a big pie, and this little dwarf bursts out of the cake, and it's like, "Hey, la, da, da, da." And she's like, "I want it.
Yeah.
And then, I'm the queen. Give it to me.
Yeah, and the Duchess is like, "Sure, you go ahead and have him." So then Geoffrey, he does become a member of the Queen's court. In 1626, and so he's 7 years old at the time. So so he goes to live in 7. So he's still 7 years old.
Oh, he's really young still. I thought he was older.
No, he was still super young, still only 18 inches tall. And so he goes.
Wait, so his parents have like they just
pretty much.
Okay.
There's no reference of him ever speaking to his family again. I mean, maybe he did. I don't know. Might have written, but it's not recorded anywhere. When he goes to live with the queen, that's when he got the nickname Lord Minimus, and so again, it was the fact that he was so small and so perfectly proportioned was why he was so unique among a lot of the dwarves that were kept at court. He was just a tiny little guy, and so Sir Walter Scott actually. So later, when Geoffrey grows up, Sir Walter Scott has a quote sort of describing what he looked like and why he was so special that way.
Thank you. Sorry. Live show. I sometimes lose my place in the notes. He, although a dwarf of the least possible size, had nothing positively ugly in his countenance or actually distorted in his limbs. His countenance in particular, had he been a little taller, would have been accounted in youth handsome, and now in age striking and expressive. It was but the uncommon disproportion betwixt the head and the trunk which made the feature seem whimsical and bizarre, and effect which was considerably increased by the dwarf's moustaches, which it was his pleasure to wear so large that they almost twisted back amongst and mingled with his grizzled hair. Dude, the old English quotes. It's like, how did I not stumble over myself during that?
Yeah, that was good. Going back to his childhood though, so when he becomes a member of the Queen's court, so as you might imagine, having a giant and the super, over 7 feet tall, and then this little guy, they were often paired up to entertain guests. And so one of the party tricks they used to do, I think they even lived together, like they lived in the same little house they were given, cottage or whatever, or rooms. But so one of the party tricks they would do, so the giant, he's Evans, he's got this giant coat, I don't know, maybe think Hagrid or something, and so he would keep in one pocket a really huge loaf of bread, and then he would pull that out for the guests, like he was going to make them some food, and then in the other pocket, hidden in the other pocket, was Geoffrey, and so he would pull him out, and then they would make the food together. It was kind of just to surprise the guests. This was one of many party tricks they used to do to entertain the guests. This is so wrong.
So strange. Could they not just talk to each other, or just like have some wine? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I really feel
So
like when I have friends around for dinner now, I'm completely lacking. I don't put on any entertainment at all.
yeah, where's your
It's
yeah,
just like,
exactly.
should we put on some Spotify music?
Yeah. So now that said, while he was sort of treated as a pet and for this object of entertainment like this, Geoffrey and the Queen actually they hit it off. Like the Queen was about 10 years older than him, but they became quite seemingly close friends. So and it was kind of speculated like why was she so fond of him? Why was he so fond of her? It's probably something to do with the fact that they were both sort of outsiders in that society. So the Queen was this Queen Henrietta was a French Catholic living in England when at the time when like being French or Catholic was like I mean Catholics were getting like executed and stuff just for being Catholic.
Yeah.
So this
Not
was
the best of times.
yeah, she didn't. And then it got worse because at a certain point, like her and her husband didn't get along at first. They actually became super close, which we'll talk about in a second. But at the beginning, they weren't getting along at all, King Charles and her. And so he blamed all her retinue, like all her entourage that she had brought from France, was kind of keeping her from him. And that's what he thought. So he just banished them. He was just, sorry, I'm getting rid of your whole entourage. And some of them refused to go at first. And so then he got his guards to come and physically escort them out of the country. He did leave a couple, like a priest and a few others, but took her later, lady in waiting, which was her best friend. What was her name? Madame Saint George. And so he like her best friend. Nope, she's gone now. And so now the Queen is kind of there all by herself, lonely, no one to talk to. But she's got Geoffrey. This all happened basically about the same time she scored Geoffrey from the Duchess. So they became quite close, and she kind of going back to the king and queen. So the relationship was rocky in the beginning, but this was a rare case where they actually became super close later. There's tons of examples, but I just did a quick little quote from a letter in January of 1645 from King Charles to the Queen.
And dear heart, thou canst not but be confident that there is no danger which I will not hazard or pains that I will not undergo to enjoy the happiness of thy company. Oh, yeah. Isn't that sweet?
Yeah, there was actually a ton of stuff like that was not just letters, but also some other stuff. But anyways, it was a little bit too far of a tangent, so I just put that one in. So yeah, Geoffrey, the Queen, they're getting along awesome, and so she really likes him. So she sees to it that he's educated. She taught how to be a gentleman, taught how to dance, like everything that the gentleman would need to do. And she started giving him some courtly tasks, especially as he got older. But even starting when he was just 10 years old, she sent him off to France with a delegation to gather her. She was pregnant at the time, so she wanted her midwife from France, and one Madame Perron, and then also 10 Catholic friars. I don't know just why you would need 10, but that's what you
got to have an entourage, man. You're royalty.
Yeah, I guess get her entourage back. Maybe they were closer now, so you could get her entourage back. So, and also the Queen Marie de Medici of France was sending a bunch of valuables to her daughter, to who is some gifts and stuff. I assume like baby gifts, like stuff just to celebrate the birth, whatever. So on that entourage that was sent to France was this interesting guy. Also, he was a hunchback, but also a dance master, which I don't know. Those seemed kind of a novelty, I guess, at the time. But he was also like really good, Jacques Cordaire de Bacon. And if you look at his resume, like he taught so many of the royals how to dance, like not just in England and whatnot. Like he was he became a super famous choreographer and also a violinist later in life. So they were sent, but of course this part was because this guy also taught Geoffrey how to dance, and so when Geoffrey was there, he was do his little routine, and his dance abilities, impressed everyone there in France, and so he actually got a ton of really awesome, expensive gifts from the court, who were just super impressed with him. But unfortunately for him, so he's got all this. He's got a little bit of wealth now. I'm
saying like his life's working out pretty good
so far. Oh, it turns dark, but okay. I mean, it's kind of
he wasn't gonna have a good time, being a dwarf in like the 1600s, and and his parents give him away, and I'm kind of like, oh, that's bad. But things are kind of
now he's educated. He's taught to be a gentleman. He's getting respect from the Queen.
He's been taught to dance by this amazing hunchback.
Yeah, yeah, great. And so, but unfortunately, so he gets all these gifts, and also, he's going back home on the ship when, of course, the ship is captured by pirates, as happened back then a lot. And so they didn't want the friars. They did take all the valuables, including all the stuff he had gotten for himself, but also the Queen's stuff. But they did want the midwife and Geoffrey were valuable, so the slavers they took him, and the Queen was quite distraught about this, and it seems like maybe she just ransomed them rather than, because normally they would just be sold off to slavery. But in this case, he was back shortly thereafter, so it's presumed the queen must have paid. There was account that she was quite concerned for his safety, and so presumably she sent some money along and got him back. But unfortunately for her, so she gives birth, and the baby dies directly after, as happened all the time back then. So the baby dies. She almost dies in the process, but then she had a super long recovery period.
Also
and
happens all the time back then.
All the time back then. And so this is where Geoffrey actually was he was her great comfort, just kind of stayed by her side through her whole healing and everything, and they became super close, even more so at this point. And then he became kind of her constant companion for a good 15 more years until something happened. I guess it was maybe 13 years. We'll get to that in a little bit. So not only was he very academically inclined, he was also a voracious reader, and at a certain point, he also, as he got older, was known for his very razor sharp weaponized wit. Just like if someone would make fun of him, he had a response right back that would
put them right down.
Put them right down. And this was endlessly amusing to the court. They thought this was hilarious because he had such a razor sharp wit and was quite funny and witty. But besides becoming well educated, he also was taught. He was given a horse and a special saddle and a special custom pistols made for someone more his size. And then he became quite an excellent horse rider and marksman as well. So this brings us, he's now 23
Jeff's
years
like
old.
A Renaissance dwarf.
He is. Like, this guy is, he's given opportunity, he's taken it.
Yeah.
Doing something with it. So at the age of 23 now, so he's quite well educated. He's, great horse rider. He's been taught all his weapons and everything like that. So the English Civil War starts in 1642.
The title for this episode shouldn't be the Dueling Dwarf, dude. It should be the Renaissance Dwarf.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. Because he's only, at this point, at 23, he's only like somewhere between 20 and 23 inches tall. It's not quite clear, but he's grown a little bit since his 7-year-old self, but like only a few inches. So he's still tiny.
Should be an additional show about this guy.
Yeah, and so at this point, he's 23, and he wants to take part. He wants to fight in the English Civil War, fight for his queen that he loves, and all that. And so the queen and the king agree to grant him the title of captain of the horse, which it's not actually clear whether they actually sent him out to do battle ever, like if he ever actually led troops or anything, or if it was just, they just made him captain of the horse just for, I don't know, ceremonial type thing. It was around this time also that the king knighted him. And although the knighted one was definitely meant as a joke, or at least the accounts where it was a joke, like during a party, like he knighted, but it was official, like he officially knighted him, so he was a knight at that point, and a captain, which, this might be why he preferred captain over sir, because maybe the sir was given kind of as a joke, even if it was official, and the captain was more like, an honor. There
was a story like last year or something. I'm sure it was just in one of the British tabloids, but like one of our royals was having a party and they invited, I think it was the singer James Blunt. I'm sure I'm going to get the story wrong. And they were just screwing around with a ceremonial sword. And I think he ended up in hospital or something. But I was like, that's such a great story. Like, yeah, they're just having a party. They were pretending to knight each other. And then, the sword was real sharp. And
that's not a good idea. So yeah, at the height of the Civil War that's happening here, the queen, she goes back to Europe and touring around trying to gain support for King Charles, and also she's selling off a lot of her valuables, which this was also used as against the king and queen back in England by their enemies at the time, because they were like, hey, they're selling off all the valuable, all the valuable jewels and stuff, which she kind of was. So that belonged to England or whatever. But so she was raising some funds like that. She wasn't able to sell some of the more valuable items because of some of the controversy and whatnot. But so Geoffrey goes with her. Of course, he's her constant companion. But at this time, so he's a captain. He's a sir,
this captain of the horse, is that like a rank, an actual military rank, or is this some sort of ceremonial title? Because I've never heard of it before.
Captain of the horse, I believe, was an actual official military rank that would normally come with some soldiers to command. But again, it's not like
and some training.
Yeah, he was, as you'll see in a minute, he's a great marksman, which has kind of ruined the rest of his life, unfortunately. But yeah, so he goes to France, and he's not having it. He's no longer entertainment. He's an adult. He's captain. He's knighted. he got the respect of the queen. He's no longer people's entertainment. So if you make fun of him, he tells the court, try it. I'll challenge you to a duel and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And so he's now at this point 1644. He's now 25 years old when a certain gentleman of the court in France, I think it was an Englishman, which we'll get who his brother was, which is important to the story. But so this gentleman, he insults Geoffrey, and it's not recorded anywhere what the insult was, but it was enough that Geoffrey challenged him to a duel. And so the guy, he thinks this is just a joke, like this is just going to be hilarious, dueling this little guy. And so he chooses Geoffrey's strong suit, which is a horse and pistols. So this is going to be the duel, horse and pistols, and it's going to be hilarious. Except so he doesn't even bring a gun. Like he comes on his horse, and instead of a gun, he brings a squirt gun. Like as it's
not going to go well for him.
No, as described by Queen Henrietta in a letter describing the event.
The giving cavalier took no firearms, but merely a huge squirt, with which he meant at once to extinguish his small adversary and the power of his weapon. The vengeful dwarf, however, managed his good steed with sufficient address to avoid the shower aimed at himself and his loaded pistols, and withal to shoot his laughing adversary dead. Oh!
Yeah. And he doesn't just shoot him dead. He uses his he's on the horseback and with these little pistols, and he shoots him square in the forehead, almost right between the eyes. And that's not, back then with those weapons too, I don't know if it was just an accident, because they usually aim for the torso with those accuracy, but he went.
When is the TV show coming? This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so he kills him, and there's a problem. This might have been amusing to the royals if it had just been like some commoner that he had dueled and shot. Like they might have thought this was really funny.
This guy asked for it. I have no sympathy for the guy who's like, don't insult me, I'm a dwarf. And then the guy insults him and he turns up for the duel with a squirt gun. I'm like, dude, this is all right. This
Jeffrey's
is entirely on you.
Yeah, Geoffrey's put up with this crap his whole life. He's having none of it anymore. He's like, screw you all. I'm going to shoot you in the head if you do this. So
it sends a proper message, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But the reason why this didn't work out for him, because this guy that he shot in the head happened to be the Queen's Master of the Horse brother. And this was Baron William Croft. This was his brother, and
no, but he's captain of the horse. That's got to outright.
Yeah, no. And so Baron William Croft didn't take kindly to his brother being shot and killed by Geoffrey. And so the other problem was that at the time in France, dueling was illegal. So not only had he killed someone who was kind of well connected, but also done something illegal, which was technically murder that he committed, even if it was a duel. So he committed murder in the eyes of law, embarrassed the queen, because her court is a guest at this other court, and then he's got one of her members of her court is killing someone. So
diplomatic immunity.
Yeah.
That came along a bit later, right?
Yeah. So Sir Geoffrey was arrested and slated to be executed for murder, but the queen, she was having none of that. She's, so she was very displeased with Geoffrey for embarrassing her in the court and killing the brother of her master of the horse. But she didn't want him executed, so she wrote to the Cardinal Mazarin and begged basically for Geoffrey's life to be spared, and the request was granted, and instead he was just exiled from France. And this is kind of where it all goes wrong for him for the rest of his life.
I bet in private she's like, I'm so embarrassed. But then she goes, "You absolute legend."
Well, yeah, the letter you just read, that was after, and she didn't describe it as like,
I'm
mad
so
at him.
ashamed.
She was just like, no, it just wasn't her tone at all. But yeah, so he goes, and it's not really clear what happens in between here. There's this point where he's exiled, and then there's the point where he gets kidnapped by pirates again. And
who gets kidnapped by pirates twice?
Yeah, and this one didn't work out for him. So it seems like it was a very small gap of time in between. So it's not clear, like, was it on his way back to England, or did he go back to England and then was captured later? It's not quite clear, but it seems like most accounts seem to indicate that it happened pretty quickly.
Okay.
So now I have lost my place. One moment.
Speaking
so
of this, just this will be a great point to plug. If you'd like this a little more punched up, our little errors cut out, and us sounding extra witty because any silences are usually just trimmed down a little, definitely get the
yeah,
podcast version of this show. It's
yeah.
it's a little
Listen
more
to it
punchy.
on your phone while you're driving, whatever,
Yeah.
driving to work. Um,
Don't watch
all right,
this
so
live
he's
while you're driving.
no,
That would
that
be a
wouldn't be good.
mistake.
So he's captured by pirates, Ottoman pirates, as it turns out, and he's a bit of a novelty. He's gonna fetch a good price on the slave market. So they take him and they sell him as a slave, which he then goes and does for about 2.5 decades, working as a slave.
That's not
Yeah,
the length of time I was expecting. Like 2.5 months.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, no, two
That's
and a half decades until the 1660s, the
hang
late
on. He's a
1660s.
dwarf, right? In the
Uh-huh.
1600s. How long is he gonna live?
That's the thing. He actually lives all the way to 63 years old. So yeah,
I thought
yeah,
dwarves had a shorter lifespan.
yeah, I thought that was the case as well. I mean, not in modern times, I don't think, but or at least not a lot. But I thought back then, but apparently not.
Yeah.
I guess, or at least not in his case.
Okay.
So in the late 1660s, England's actually doing this thing where they're going. So there'd been like thousands and thousands of these of their people that had got captured and sold off as slaves, and so they were actually paying to get them back.
Wait,
So they had lots
thousands
of
of dwarves?
no thousands of people, like just English citizens that were getting
Uh,
kidnapped and made into slaves, and so they were
so
sending.
someone's like building a dwarf colony.
No, so they were sending like money and also diplomats and what to try to get these English citizens back in the 1660s, and so he was one of those, like in the late 1660s, that ends up getting freed somehow in this process. And so it's not really clear when exactly he made it back to England, but the first reference of him being back in England was in 1669, and unfortunately for him, this was also when the Queen died that year. So when he got back, he couldn't rely on her patronage anymore. But the other reason he couldn't rely on really, he couldn't go back to his old position for anyone, because if he had still been a tiny little guy, he could other courts would have taken him in. But the problem was in his captivity. So a little bit later, the only reason we know any of the stuff that happens now is from, there's this guy named James Wright, who is an author writing a history book of Rutland, so where Geoffrey is originally from, and he interviewed Geoffrey before his death. So we have some brief snippets of kind of what happened there. And so it turns out, while he was a slave, somehow between the age of about 25 and 50, he grew 22 inches, almost doubling his height randomly. And so now he wasn't just he was just like a short guy. Like back then, that wasn't that short. I mean, it was short, but not like super short. So he was just kind of a little guy, but not like a novelty as he was before. So he couldn't go back to his old position. And so, and this his time as a slave, he didn't really describe what he got up to exactly, except for like little references. And it wasn't a good time based on this interview. So small references. So he credited his growth. Why? How did he grow? How did he grow? And so he credited
that amazing slave diet.
He credited it to hard labor and buggery. Is buggery still a term used in Britain?
Yes.
I know bugger is.
Yeah,
I know bugger, but buggery, is that still a term that you would?
Most definitely.
Yeah, and so for those who don't know what that is, that's sodomy. So apparently he was used not well as a slave,
and he was like, "This is what made me grow."
Yeah, the hard labor and the sodomy. So whatever the case, now he is free. At least now he's around 50 years old at this point, and much taller. Obviously can't get a position, but he does go to the Duke of Buckingham and King Charles II. So it's Duke of Buckingham George Vere II, so the son of his former mistress, and then also Charles II, son of Queen Henrietta, who is now dead. So he goes to them, and they do give him some money to sort of restart his life. And so it's not really clear what happened to him between this point and then, so it's 1669 and 1676, when he's traveling to London to try to get a pension, not just like a one-off money. He wants a pension. And so he goes, but this is like one of the peaks of the anti-Catholic, sentiment in the country. And he's a Catholic because when he was a little kid, the Queen, Queen was his best friend, and she was Catholic. So he became Catholic, and, not a good time to be Catholic. And so he arrives in London, and he gets promptly arrested for being Catholic. And then he gets thrown in jail for the next 4 years. He sits in prison for being Catholic, and eventually released in 1680. And then what happens after is not really known, other than he died 2 years later at the age of 63 in 1682, buried in a pauper's grave, despite the fact that he was a knight and a captain of the horse. No headstone or anything like that, just tossed in a grave somewhere, no one knows where. There is, at least near the place of his birth now, a little sign that's been put up at some point, and it reads,
Sir Geoffrey Hudson's 1619 1682, a dwarf presented in a pie to King Charles I.
Yeah.
Of all the things he did.
Yeah, that's what's. And then there is a statue of him. I can't remember, like in front of some tavern or something that someone put up at some point. So he's got a statue at least.
And wasn't he presented to the Queen and then she took him?
Yeah.
He was presented in a pie to the king as well. I guess the king agreed with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be really disappointed if that was me. Like, I'd be like, I shot that guy in the face. And it was awesome.
he was leading such a cool life up to that point. And it should have only gotten cooler. Like, now he would have got some respect, like people would stop, start taking him seriously. And then now he sold into slavery, and that was that.
Well, that was basically the latter half of his life was significantly worse.
Yeah, not a good time.
25 years of slavery. It's not awesome.
Yeah, and he had, I guess the first 25 years were all right.
Yeah, it seemed pretty good.
Yeah,
seemed pretty good. Is that where the story ends today?
That is where the story ends today.
I do think this would make a great show, like a mini series on HBO or something.
Well, you have in Game of Thrones, they have the one character who's kind of like this, only like a royal himself, like not just a member of the court, right? What is it? I don't know, Tyrone, maybe.
Dude, I've never seen Game of Thrones. What do you expect?
No, I haven't seen it either, because I was waiting for it to finish, because I thought I might actually like it. So I like to wait till the show's done so I can just watch the whole thing. But the problem is then everyone says the last season is crappy, and so now I don't really feel like I want to invest the time to watch it if it's just going to end crappily.
To watch the whole thing, why not just skip the last season?
Well, you got to see how it ends, but then if it's awful, then I'm just going to be like, well, that was a waste,
That's true. That's how I feel about Lost. Did you ever watch Lost, the TV show where they're on the islands? The ending was not great. Not great.
Yeah.
That one I miss.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been the Brain Food Show. Support us by supporting our sponsor, backblaze.com/brainfood. 14 days, 15 days for free as a trial. Leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Anything else you want to add?
Well, apparently, I think I must have got the name wrong, because people are getting the.
Oh, in Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Let's see.
It's okay. Doesn't matter. Lannister, apparently.
I don't know.
Tyrone?
Tyrion. Lannister.
Who cares? This show, we'll be back. Not next week.
Thank you, Kai Force, for the $2. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, people, that's cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll be back.
Pronounced Tyrion. Apparently.
Tyrion.
Tyrion.
Well, the problem is you've given us a word tier, which can be pronounced two ways.
Yeah, that's true. I guess Tyrion. That sounds better.
Tyrion. Okay, it seems to be a debate going on about how to pronounce it. Okay. Should we wrap things up?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another brand new show. And yeah, thanks for listening. All right. Now, like I do every week, I got to work out how to kill this live stream. Dun, 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 dun.